Superman is a character I've always deeply loved and always felt a bit awkward for it. Don't get me wrong, as a kid growing up, I felt shy about sharing my love for all the nerdy things I enjoyed. I always felt embarrassed for wearing the shirts I loved to school and fear that I would be rejected. And by the time I got to high school, I realized that everybody's actually into all the nerdy stuff I like, and that it's not only socially acceptable, but it's actually cool, and that you're kind of the weird one if you don't like superheroes or Star Wars. But for some reason, that shy feeling I had didn't really go away when I hit high school. But let me tell you, that didn't stop me from rocking the most absolute badass Superman shirts. You see that? Those are real, baby. All those school lunches with my sides of milk and fruit really paid off in those days. Probably because the milk I had with every meal made me shit out 95% of my body fat. So thank you, Michelle Obama. I could have never looked this good without you. Now, as a grown-ass man, I don't give a shit what people think of me all that much, so I wear my Superman shirts out all the time. But something about him has always called to me, because even as the most insecure high schooler, I still wore my Superman shirts to school while people gave me dirty looks and laughed. And for some odd reason, I just didn't care during the period in my life where all I did was care. And when watching Man of Steel for the first time when I was 11, it blew my mind at how much Goyer, Snyder, and Nolan made such a human version of the character, that it has always stuck with me and pushed me further into not just Superman comics, but comics as a whole. In fact, one of the first comics I ever bought was an Action Comics double-sized issue, and I paid a whopping $5 of my own money for it. And let me tell you, I reread that son of a bitch over and over. I'm talking at least once a week for a few years. And as I would talk about Superman with friends I had in middle school or other people that enjoyed superhero media throughout the years, there's always this arm's length relationship people have with the big blue Boy Scout. They say he's boring, too overpowered, not an emotional character to follow, he's too old-fashioned, and the worst and wrongest statement I've ever heard in my life: he's just not relatable. It just feels like everyone thinks Superman is lame. I would, and still do, sit there in annoyance that it seems like the modern world simply doesn't care about Superman anymore. 85 years later, we are still infatuated with Batman. 62 years on, we still have an attachment to Spidey. And within the past 15 years, C-list characters like Iron Man have become more popular than the one that started it all. The one that made the superhero genre explode into popularity. So I sit in fear thinking about how the character whose creation has brought us a substantial majority of the media we consume today might die out and be left in the past. When in truth, out of all the fictional characters to ever exist, we need him the most right now. And I wonder to myself, can Superman connect with an audience in 2025? Man of Steel made a decent amount of money back in 2013, but Warner Brothers was expecting more financial gain coming off of Nolan's Dark Knight trilogy, hoping that the DC brand with Nolan's name attached to it could reach the same box office heights of the previous 3 Batman films. 2 years later, Batman v Superman made close to $900 million at the box office, which was a tremendously respectable bump from Man of Steel's almost $700 million haul. But there's 2 things to take into consideration here. 1. Let's be honest, the movie already had help with Batman being in the movie. Because as much as I love Man of Steel, the reception to the movie at the time was all over the place. So who knows how a direct traditional sequel would have done at the time. And 2, it was another movie that made a great amount of money but was still not what Warner Brothers was looking for, which was a billion-dollar hit. And by the time Justice League came out, not only did it seem like people were done with the DC brand, but with Superman as a whole. Now with regards to James Gunn's new Superman in DCU, from everything I've seen from it, I'm very optimistic towards it, even if I have a few slight concerns. And with shows like Superman and Lois and My Adventures with Superman, I don't doubt that there are still creative teams out there outside of the comics that can make good Superman stories. My main concern is, does the mass population, not us nerds sitting here watching and making videos about superheroes, not the ones going in every Wednesday to pick up an issue of Superman or Action Comics or even World's Finest, and not the ones who go searching for every single piece of news or leaks that have to do with our favorite franchises and characters. I'm talking about your mom, dad, grandma, cousin, the 30-year-old neighbor that lives 2 houses down from you who still hasn't moved out of the house, who has no career plan, works at Subways, but has a custom Dodge Charger that costs $48,000 but has a $15,000 a year salary. I'm talking about everyone else but us. Will they care about Superman? I'm honestly not sure, and I'm scared that he's already been rejected. We live in a time where it feels like selfishness is at an all-time high, a time where all we care about is attention, a time where no one can get along, a time where people can barely afford to feed their families. And we've come a long way since 1938, sometimes for the better and sometimes for the worse. But just because something is older doesn't mean we have to reject it. It doesn't mean it's wrong. How else do we learn anyway? The art of learning means to reflect on the past, because the biggest lessons come from there. And with the case of Superman, looking back into the past to find why he was created in the first place proves to me just how much we need him now. Jerry Siegel and Joe Shuster created Superman in the middle of the Great Depression. And I don't think I need to explain the similarities between now and then to you. But my point is, during such a crucial point in history where everyone was losing faith. Faith in their government, in hope, in the ability to provide, and the American dream. There was a character that came out and inspired millions by not only distracting them from the horrid realities of life for a few minutes, but reminded people what America was supposed to stand for. And Superman represents the American dream to a T. Being an immigrant, growing up in a modest living, trying to make the kinds of opportunities his past generations couldn't achieve, doing blue-collar work until he climbs up the ranks and becomes something fantastical, like a journalist. The idea of truth, justice, and the American way has also turned a good portion of people away from the character lately, primarily focusing on the American way aspect. And it sure is an uncomfortable conversation to have these days, so DC changed the motto, primarily to truth, justice, and a better tomorrow, which as a red-blooded American and Superman fanboy, I honestly love. Because despite whether we believe if the American way is being done right, the principles of what it is supposed to be are. The ideals of helping one another, creating something from nothing, that anybody from any given background or walk of life has the chance of liberty and the pursuit of happiness. Or, in other words, to summarize all of that, a chance at a better tomorrow. Superman is the ethos of striving for a better future, not just for America, but for the world as a whole. That's why I actually adore the change of slogan, because even though he represents the American dream, he can also equally, or even more so, represent the ideas of creating a healthier version of the world we all live in. One of my favorite Superman comics of all time is Superman Volume 2, Issue 53, titled Funny Enough, Truth, Justice, and the American Way. Aziz Supes agreed to escorting a group of military planes over to Karak to bring a terrorist to trial in the US. At the end of the issue, there is a big plot twist where you find out one of the two generals running the operation was involved with the terrorist. And the second general knew about it for 6 months, but did nothing because he wanted to build a case for it in court. Superman gets angry, telling him that many innocent people died because he didn't act sooner. The second general basically tells him that Supes did his duty to America and that he should be happy and move on. But that angers Superman even more. I believe in everything this flag stands for, but as Superman, I have to be a citizen of the world. I value all life, regardless of political borders. And this idea gets more expansion in another one of my favorite Superman stories called Superman Peace on Earth, where Superman decides to fly around the entire Earth in a single day to bring food and resources to every country. It's an extremely touching story with some of the best artwork in a comic you'll ever see in your life, and shows that yes, Superman is more than just an American icon. He is a worldly icon. And when the world is in such a questionable and vulnerable place, a hero that shows us not necessarily what it is to be an American, but what it means to be a good human being, is something we all need to know and feel right now. And if Gunn can stick the landing and make a truly great Superman film that gives us those exact feelings, I think Superman will be able to connect with a modern day audience. I just hope that they give him the chance he deserves. Because Clark is like the majority of us. A person who never fully feels like he can fit in anywhere. A person that believes he has to hide parts of himself from the world because they might dismiss him for it. Someone who came from a non-materialistic enriched lifestyle, but had big dreams of doing something with his life and the gifts he's been given. A person who loves, hurts, shares empathy, fights for purpose, believes in hope, shows resilience in the face of all that is wrong, and above all, simply wants to be accepted. Now, How do you get more relatable and human than that?